So you were saying, always have the premise before character creation, right?
Yes.
Okay.
The only reason that you'd want the premise before character creation is because it allows people to make towards that premise without creating something that's against type. You don't want to go into a neo-noir setting with somebody who thought it was going to be a comedic superhero type of game when everybody else is building gritty, dark, realistic characters with trauma galore. And then you have the young upstart dude who suddenly has superhuman powers and is trying to fight crime. They could mesh well, but most of the time, things that don't have a like type in games like these tend to clash and cause issues or unfulfillment for one person or a group later on down the line. So it is important to have everybody kind of be on the same page, just because these types of games are collaborative. It's a group storytelling effort, and everybody needs to kind of pull their weight and chip in when these things can happen. Now, I'm not going to say anybody's going to be useless in those. It's not at all what's being said. It is just one of those things where people need to be aware of how the storytelling aspect of a game like this happens. So, setting premises established, that's great. You just have to create your case now. For me specifically, I've heard people, when they start writing cases, they will say, well, I don't want to do anything too cliche. I want to do something unique. I want to do something that's never been done before. That's great. That is a great place to try and go for, or a great goal to try to achieve. The problem's going to be you are going to limit yourself, especially if this is your first time writing a case. I mean, even me, I've done, 20, 30 different cases that I've written, and I have no problems using cliches, because a cliche is there for a reason. It's a reliable standby tool that you can utilize to get somebody involved or invested with something.
Agreed.
The problem is people get is like, a cliche is like, well, it's not unique enough. It's like, no, the cliche that you're using to start something doesn't have to be unique. It just has to be interesting. The players are going to be the ones that make everything unique. Their choices you cannot control. You know that as well as I do.
I love starting in a tavern, by the way.
So what now?
I love starting in a tavern.
Yeah, I do too. I don't mind that at all. I like the tavern just because it is one of those issues, or one of those things where you can determine how long the group has been together before the session. Like, hey, you guys have known each other for 3 months, or you're all just meeting each other randomly, or this, that, or the other. So that does allow you some creative flexibility, and then it gives them a moment to get into that little role play and try to build into their characters' mindsets before you throw something at them.
For sure.
But yeah, and for City of Mist, tavern could be 24-hour diner. I really love Greasy Spoon diners, like right off the edge of the highway. Those are some of my favorite spots to put people, just because it feels relaxed and it doesn't feel like they're being forced to do something. And everybody knows what a diner provides. It's kind of like how a tavern, like, well, what do they have? Do they have meat? Do they have wine? Do they have this? And like 24-hour diners got shitty coffee, eggs, bacon, probably too much grease, and broken salt shakers.
Hey, that's just what you need, though.
Exactly. That's all you need to make life work.
Yeah.
But don't let anything, when it comes to creating a case, deter you from using it because it's not unique enough in your own mind. For me specifically, it all kind of depends on the crew too. So that's where the setting premise came through. So if you have a group of detectives, and they're actually, are employed by the city, so they have a paycheck they're collecting because the city is paying them to do this kind of thing, that is an easy premise for you to work with, because any crime that happens is already an inciting incident. It could be murder, it could be robbery, it could be extortion, it could be, even white collar issues can also be another thing. It could be high society people's kidnappings, blackmail. There's so many crimes that can happen that could pull people in, especially depending on who is going to have a vested interest in the crime. So me, I always like, with the very first case, I like to do a murder, just because a murder has such severe consequences for people, and it lets them know that, hey, this is still a city, it's still dangerous, and you're in an era where it's like, or there's still adult themes that are going on, and it does allow you to tell them at some point they're going to be in danger. That should just be an inherent thing that they notice, but it doesn't always work for some people, because some people aren't a fan of that. So then you can pick blackmail. Somebody needs help, so they come to the crew, or one person in the crew, and they ask them for help. Either it's a monetary reward, or it could be something honor bound, or it could be a favor. There's multiple ways that you can do it. You just kind of have to work with your crew and see who has the best background for you to play with during the first part of the case.
Yep, that's what I did.
And
I'll get into that.
The thing too, yeah. And there's also the aspect where you can always like whenever you involve a crew member, you can make them the center of the case, or you can make them a tangent portion of the case. Making them the center of the case is one thing, but it does kind of give off like a main character syndrome aspect if you're not careful.
Yeah.
If you're not used to running something like that, it's probably best to avoid making them the main focus right at the bat, because you also don't know if somebody's going to end up leaving or any of those, especially with a brand new group. But I'm not saying don't do it, just be cautious and be cognizant that it might happen and you might have to pivot at some point.
Yep.
Now, I think for City of Mist specifically, because of what it espouses, and there's so many different types of ways you can play this game too. Like, if you want to be a gatekeeper, if you want to have a normal crew, that's fine. But if you are playing this game like as a classic City of Mist, I think one of the best ways to start off with is with something that's stolen, something that needs to be recovered, but they can't go to traditional sources to get it. They can't go to the FBI, the CIA, they can't go to the local police department because they wouldn't understand, or maybe the item that got stolen was illegal in the first place. So they go through back channels to get their hands on somebody who can work outside the law to get them their item back. That's always a fun thing to do. And if it's stolen, make it like an actual relic. Make it something that would have power in the City of Mist itself. So it could be Thor's hammer, it could be Odin's spear, it could be Aladdin's lamp. There's so many objects in myth that you can pull from and just turn it into a mundane looking object in the real world, or in City of Mist world at least, and have that be the crux of the case, and then try to find it.
Some type of magical tome, you know.
Yeah. Magical books, those are always fun.
Yeah.
Until they're not.
Until they screw you.
Yeah. Or they freeze everybody and steal all their life force. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's just kind of the inciting incident. It is just keep in mind your players. Keep in mind the kind of game that they want to play, the kind of game you want to play, and then just try to meld them together. It's a nebulous concept, and it's really hard to tell you this is how you would do X, Y, Z. This is how you would do A, B, C, because we aren't dealing with those people. But like, let's say in the last case that I ran, the very first, the murder that had happened, I had to find ways to link all my characters for it. So we had a detective who had retired his badge and then went private investigator. So I had somebody outside the law hire him very specifically because it would be in the vested interest of somebody who was connected to the murder victim to stay out of the limelight and to stay more or less innocent. Then we also have somebody who's a fixer. So they were hired to help keep the law away from the person with the vested interest, which was another of my players whose father didn't want her or her reputation being tarnished or blackened in any way and potentially being associated with the murder because she was the murdered victim's roommate. So there's multiple ways you can drag people into it. Sometimes it might seem a little far-fetched, but that's part of the game. You just go with them, roll with them. And if people question it, then you can decide later on, okay, well, we can alter this or we can make that like that was just a cover up for something more deeper and insidious. And that's the best part about players is they will challenge you, but they'll also give you opportunities for you to improvise and adapt to them and make it a little bit more personal. Most of the time. Some of them might just be happy with what you gave them. Other ones might need a little bit more motivation, and those are the types of players that you can work with one-to-one outside of the game and then make it happen in the next session, which is another thing too. You have multiple sessions. You don't have to worry about screwing up one and then it ruining everything else. You have plenty of time to get it right, and you'll work your way towards it, especially if you're a new MC.
Yes, one thing I've learned or I'm learning is you always have, there's time to like adjust or, pivot, and that's okay.
Yeah. And never being afraid to pivot is something that people need to, or that should be, hammered home as well. It's not a static game. It is a fluid and shifting game in every sense of the word, because you never know what your players are going to do, and the only job you really have is to control the world around them. Not them. You won't be able to control their actions, but you can control the consequences, and you can control the city that you build in terms of whatever kind of political climate's going on, whether it's outreach programs that are getting destroyed because the slush fund is being torn apart or siphoned from or embezzled from. There's so many little things that happen in the city that you can control, but if the players aren't going to interact with it, just keep it in the back of your mind. Don't actually make that something that the players need to discover, especially if they have no real interest in getting into like the political climate of the city. They'd rather just solve the local murders or the local crimes in like one sector of the city.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then next part of this is going to be scene investigation. So we wanted to do guidelines for setting up initial scenes and then tips for creating immersive and interactive environments. So let's say the first thing you're going to run into is a murder. You have a victim that is going to be on the ground or wherever they're going to be in a dumpster. You have that person in a location and they should have all the clues on them that the crew would need to get to another spot. So whenever you write these cases, you've got to write a couple of things down. I start off with the inciting incident, which would be the murder. And then I would make up 3 spots that the person or that character could have been connected to in some way. So you have a nightclub, you have a school they went to, you have a house they went to, or you have like a friend's house. So that's 4 spots you could potentially get to. You just got to have clues that link to those areas. And then once you do that, you can link from those areas to the next and the next and the next. And that's just kind of the flow of how things go. But when it comes to creating those details, it's more or less up to you to figure out what those details are going to be. So if it's a club, a stamp on the back of the wrist is there, or like a bracelet that would identify them as being part or like having gone to that club the night previously. You can further extrapolate that. Okay, they were at a club. What kind of clothing were they wearing? Is it like a higher end club? Is it a more casual club? Is it like a country bar? Is it this, that, or the other? Every little detail you make should correlate with the area that the crew is going to be going to. So if it was like a country bar, okay, you got denim shirts, you got a cowboy hat, you got flannel. It doesn't matter about being cliche or like a little bit overt on what the details are, just because that's what helps sell the imagery to the players. And then once you have that established, you need to create the clues for them to follow. So you have the stamp, you have the wristband, you have the clothing. Great. They were at this country bar. That's the one in the city XYZ. It's within close proximity. Cool. They can go that direction. Or if you want them to go somewhere else, you could have the way that they got murdered could have been particularly vicious. So you're like, okay, we're looking for somebody that stabbed you. We're looking for somebody that beat you. We look for somebody that did this heinous crime. And then the crew's going to investigate, which is another important part of this, is how the crew investigates will kind of determine what kind of clues you need to have. So that's always fun to look at the power tags that your players are using and then build clues that they could possibly find out of that. Like we have one character who is empowered by the goddess of myths and rumors. Her specifically, whenever it comes to investigating, she's not going to be doing crime scene analysis because myths and rumors don't really translate to looking down and seeing the red fibers of a particular brand of dress or any of that stuff. Rather, when she investigates, she's going to talk to people that might have known or might have seen, and then she can pick up rumors from that and she can glean clues from that very specific method of investigation. Whereas if you have a detective, he would know specifically what to look for in a crime scene. Oh, okay, lots of bruising. That probably means that she was beaten. The bruising is in this particular pattern, so it was probably done post-mortem, meaning that the person that was doing it was probably really angry. There's a lot of little things that can be extrapolated depending on how you describe the clues you give the players. And then whenever it comes to creating the environments, immersive environments are more about the sensations that you have. Like you can provide an emotional element for it if it's necessary. Like if you're going to be meeting with family members, yeah, an emotional element is probably a good thing to have because one character is going to be connected to it. They're going to have that emotional connection, and then you can play off of that. You can put somebody in danger, you can make one of them a little bit more keyed up or a little bit more anxious. That'll provide good role play moments for them to play off of. But when you're coming to setting a scene or environment, you have to determine how the environment would be without the player there, and then that's what they would see when they enter it. Then they can change it later on for better or for worse, how through their actions or whatever they kind of utilize with the moves that they make. So if you go to like a coffee shop, it's gonna be probably busy depending on what time of day it is. You'll have overworked baristas, you'll have people that are tired, you'll have people that are trying to get through their day, rushing, talking on their phones. It'll be hectic, frantic. It'll have the coffee smell, but it'll probably also have that smell of people that have been moving throughout the city. So heavy cologne, heavy perfume, somebody who didn't wash or bathe regularly. Every little detail you throw in there can kind of help elevate that scene and sell it. You've got hardwood floors, you've got live wood edge tables, you've got people working on laptops, so you've got people that are doing things that are modern mixed with old school ways of doing things. everything can help sell a scene or provide an environment with more life than just saying, okay, you're at a coffee shop. What do you do? If you can breathe more life into your scenarios, it makes people more engaged.
Agreed. Yes.
And then, did you have any questions, Maya, or anything to help guide this for very specifically with clues finding?
Clues. I think.
Whereas the way that I do
Yeah.
clues is, with the way that I do clues with this game is you
Yeah.
have the move investigate. Investigate is the one that you would generally use for everything involving finding information to move your story forward through the game rules. The problem is, let's say you have a character whose character is a crime scene investigator. That's great. The character would find all the stuff, but you have the player who has never been a crime scene investigator. They don't know what questions to ask. They don't know the direction that you want them to take. So me personally, whenever they have those moments, if somebody rolls and they gets a 10 on the investigate roll and they have 3 clues, I'm going to give them the 3 best clues that I can without them having to ask. I'll just say, hey, you notice that this person has a stamp on the back of their wrist that is fresh, might be a little bit worn from the night, but it is still fresh. And so you can glean from that they were at Club XYZ probably before they were killed. And then you also see they have this wristband that indicates that they were probably going to a music festival at some point. And then the way that they were dressed probably points out that they were like either a young person or that they were going to another club or they were part of something else going on. So whatever clues you want to give them are the ones that you would have to tell them whenever they investigate. And make sure that those clues that you give them are your good clues. The game does provide you the option to give them clues that are partially fuzzy or untrue, but the only hang up you're going to have with this game with the investigate move is if they fail it, then that kind of creates like a choke point for where the case cannot progress any further, because the game says you cannot repeat moves in the area unless something changes. So if you fail an investigate roll at the crime scene and the entire crew is not there and nobody else can help out, you kind of stalled them on that point. So don't be afraid to let them find something that can move them forward. They'll just move forward with less information. And so they'll still be a little bit confused and they can find out stuff later on, but do not prevent them from progressing because of a failed roll. That roll should just give them extra information for them to utilize going forward rather than being the arbiter of whether they get to go forward.
Yeah, I think you touched on this, but I would say make the clues more diverse. So have some where they have to look beyond the mist, or they have to investigate, or they have to take the risk for a certain clue to get certain information. But yeah.
Oh yeah, and the other thing is that the investigate move does have a lot of conditions or a lot of different ways it can be utilized, because not everybody investigates the same way. One person can investigate by talking, and some people are like, well, you're trying to convince. It's like, no, I'm trying to gain information, and in doing so, you're using the investigate role just by talking to people. And so it's just you have to be cognizant of it, but you also have to be aware that not all your players work the same way. So they've got other conditions to allow them to get the same access or same type of information that your investigative player would. So just something to keep in mind with that. If you have a guy who's got a rift of a werewolf, he could probably smell if he's got heightened senses, he can smell the liquor that hasn't fully metabolized but is still kind of seeping through her skin, or the murder victim's skin, or they can trace their scent back through the city if they wanted to find out where they were. So the clue is still the same, the information is still the same, and it still gets them from point A to point B. It's just a different method on how it was used.
Exactly.
And then the look beyond the mist, that is one of my favorite moves, specifically because it allows players to get a peek through what is causing the issues that they're investigating. So in order to use that effectively, I find that if you have a magical influence or a source of magic that was the cause of something, start describing that, but do it in small stages. So the first time they look beyond the mist, it's just the setting of where that magical item would be. So if you wanted to play off of like the Aladdin cartoon movie, you could be like, hey, there's like there's a shifting dune and sand that starts to form a face, and then that face kind of extends out of the sand and it takes on the shape of looks like a tiger's head. And as it starts to open up, the eyes glow. Then you can cut it off right then and there. That's just a little tidbit of information for them to see beyond the mist. And I always do it as a vision. So however long your description takes doesn't matter, because in real time for their character, it's like a second that goes by. But for the description, it could take a minute or so for them to fully be engrossed in what's going on. But that gives them a clue. Hey, something magical is happening. Something beyond the realm of normal is going on. So we should probably be on our guard. And then eventually you might give them enough clues to where your players will actually figure out the mythos of that. If they do, that's wonderful, because that means they can start planning around the mythos and trying to figure out if there's clues or if there's weaknesses specifically in case they run into that mythos, and then they can use that against them in the final fight. That's always a fun aspect of the game that I think gets overlooked.
I love having them figure it out. I always say, if you figure it out, I'll tell you. I won't be like coy about it. Like, yeah, that's it.
Exactly.
It's really cool.
Problem is though, like, there's so many myths to draw from, so sometimes you pick a really niche one that somebody's not going to get. Like Sunny got really close with the one that I had for our case, where it was a Nixie, which is a shape-shifting water spirit, but she got really close. I think she said it was like a Selkie, I think, something like that. Basically the same thing. It's like the same kind of myth. They're both water spirits, and they have kind of shape-shifting abilities, but the one that I used was German, whereas hers was Scottish. So, close enough.
Yeah. And there's like you said, there's different variations on like essentially the same thing. So it's hard sometimes.
Well, yeah, you got cultures that draw from the same wellspring. It's like, oh, it started off here, and then delineated here, and then here, and then here, and they all they're similar. They just have different names, and they all function about the same, or they might look a little different, but essentially it's still the same thing. So if you wanted to, you could give it to them. If you didn't want to, you don't have to. So it all just depends. And I think with Look Beyond the Mist, because it is an investigate move, you can let them ask questions about the myth that they saw, and then give them the answers. Like, oh, it's water based, but do I get any kind of sense of the geography? It's like, oh yeah, you do. It seems like it might have been in Western Europe. The Western Europe range where you saw the marsh or whatever it was that you utilized in your description.
Yeah.
So I like to give them the details, and then the questions they have should just be clarifying questions or enhancing questions. Now, I can't control what questions you're going to ask, so if they use them up on those, they use them up on those. That's just on them. I can try to give them the clues, but
I like to say that you can ask a question, or I could just give you the clues, and a lot of the time the players will just be like, yeah, just give me the clues, because I've been in a lot of games where they're like, okay, now what do I ask? Does anybody else have any questions? Like, so they're not really sure about what questions to ask for certain clues and stuff like that. So like you're saying, and it also helps streamline the game too.
Oh yeah.
To just be like, this is what you find.
It'll take because it could take a case that could go 10 sessions, and it can cut it down to 5. It just depends on what kind of information you're giving them. And I don't think the clue should be used to hold anybody back. It should just be enhancing and moving them forward. But also, like you said, they don't know what questions to ask, and then I find sometimes they get hung up on what power tags they used and try to figure out how to ask a question that still falls in line with the power tags used. So it's like, that can kind of be a hang up for them sometimes, but it's just easier to give them the clue whenever you see that happening. You're like, all right, I understand where you're going through, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you the clues, and we're just, as I give you the clues, I'm going to burn through your questions. If you have a question you want to ask it, and then we'll use that as well. But at least you'll have something to move forward with.
Yeah, sometimes they do have questions, but a lot of the time it's less stressful to just give them the, this is what you find.
Yeah. So. 100%. So that kind of covered the clue fabrication as well. But essentially, when it comes to clue fabrication, the only thing you have to worry about is giving them. It's kind of like the rule of 3. So if you've got like let's say we have a case where like a werewolf is on the loose, but the crew doesn't know it's a werewolf. So they're investigating a house where somebody got attacked by a werewolf. Clues you would have to have 3 clues that could point to it being a werewolf. So you could have footprints that go from wolf paws to human feet that lead away from the crime scene. You could have the fact that it was a full moon at that time of the attack. That was also part of what makes it happen that way. And then you can have the other aspect of, the local butcher shop was getting raided for the fresh meat and it had animalistic bite marks, or you could have claw marks on a wall. Every little clue you give them should correlate with what they need to find or what you think they need to find. But as long as you give them 3 clues to make their decision, generally speaking, that should work out. Just don't be vague with the clues. Be pretty on the nose, especially if they roll really well for it. They earn those.
Oh, for sure. Does anybody have any questions at this point about clues, about the scene investigating, like the inciting incident? Anything?
Yeah, you can throw them in chat or you can ask them away. I'm open either way.
Yeah. So I guess what's the balance that you, in your opinion, I guess what is your guys' like sweet spot of, giving them information but like not too much information?
For me, when it comes to giving them information, it should just be enough to get them to make the conclusion for themselves. So in like the werewolf example, you have wolf prints that lead to a human's feet, you have the full moon, and then you have animalistic claw marks. Now, their characters might not believe in werewolves, but the players should be able to put that together. And if they don't, then you can add a little bit more to it. There's a tuft of wolf hair here, but it's also mixed with human hair. There's the local butcher shop got raided. You heard stories about one guy who goes missing for 3 days a month. There's all those little things can stack up and add up. But again, there is the risk that your players won't get it or they won't put it together because like player brain and MC brain are vastly different. I've been a player, I've been an MC more often than I've been a player, but as a player, I don't think ahead or to control the city. I think about the moment in the scene, and sometimes no matter how good the clues are, you're not gonna piece it together like the MC wants. So when that happens, you just have to be a little bit more forgiving and give them a little bit extra. Like the balance you're worried about, I wouldn't worry about giving them too much information. Give them the information and let them run wild with it, because players will surprise you with what they think and how they interpret the information you give them. Even if you say it's red, it's like, well, it could be like a fake red, or it could be a red that is only red in this particular light. You never know what what method or route they're going to go down. So
yeah, and inside you're like, God damn, it's just red, you guys, come on. They're like going down all these holes.
Yeah, it's like, well, it could be red connected to the blood moon. I'm like, I didn't set that up at all.
Yeah.
You're reading too much into it. So they err on the side of caution of giving too much information rather than not enough.
Yeah. And I always make sure it's the right amount of information so that they can at least get to the next depth. So I have the depth 0, which is the hooks, depth 1, 2, 3, 4, however deep you're going. And then the clues, and if they're in depth 1, it should lead to depth 2 and not go straight to the truth of the entire case and who the big bad is. So, yeah, that's how I think about my clues as well. Make sure it's good enough to get information to move forward, but not so blatant that they're like, oh, this is the bad guy. Yeah.
And there is the case to be made too, where whenever you start writing your first case or you start writing a case in general, you figure out how many depths you want it to be, and you work your clues off of that. Now, each depth, a general rule of thumb I give is every location should have 5 clues. So if depth 2 has 3 locations, that's 15 clues I gotta write. Now, those clues can't overlap. So, if they're in depth 1 or like location 1, they could have 5 clues, but in depth 2, 2 of those clues could overlap. Like, oh yeah, they had friends, or they had this, or their cell phone went mysteriously missing. Those clues can be found at the same location, just to help flesh out the image for them and the case itself. It gives them all that information to work with, as long as and if they're taking notes, it makes it easier for them later on to piece it all together. And they're not going to hit every location in depth 1, and they're not going to hit every location in depth 2.
Definitely not.
Just be fluid with it, and then if you think one clue from another location might be better suited for the one they're in, just take it and throw it in there. you can make it work, and most of the time they won't question why a clue is there. It'll just work out in your favor more often than not, because they're interested in figuring out the mystery and moving on to the next spot or getting into the next fight or whatever it may be. They don't know how many clues you've got spread apart across other locations. So
Yeah, and it helps
Just-
a lot
it's
if
just-
all the clues are just movable and malleable. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, being fluid and adaptable with this game helps a lot,
Oh, yeah.
because
Oh, yeah.
it can be really tempting to tie yourself down and say, no, they have to be here to get these 3 clues. That's great, but you also could potentially hamstring yourself, and if that happens, then you're going to run into a part of the game where you as an MC, where you're running it, are going to get frustrated because things aren't moving and they're stuck in one area, or they're stuck spinning around and twiddling their thumbs because they can't figure out what to do. It's like, the best example I can give is like D&D players who overanalyze a door. They spend all this time trying to search for traps, unlock the door, see if it's magical, see if it's got anything that's going on, if it's any of that. So an hour and a half goes by, and then you're like, okay, we're gonna try and open the door. It's like, yeah, the door was unlocked the whole time.
Yeah. Just insight checking everyone and perception checking
Yeah.
everything. Oh my god.
Yeah. You remember that one chef we ran into 3 cities back? We gotta find him. He knows all about this door. Like, no, he doesn't. And I know these are extreme and silly examples, but it is kind of relevant to, they might get themselves stuck in an area if you don't help move them along, which as an MC, your job is to set the scene, set the stakes, get the characters involved, run the case and all that stuff, but you also have to play like the arbiter of the timeline, and you can move them forward. So I don't mind letting players role play with each other 5, 10, 15 minutes. If they're into it and they're going, go for it. There is going to come a time where you kind of have to call it quits, just because either the scene isn't going to add anything more to the characters, there's no more emotional levity to be used, and there's nothing more that would progress it, so you can move it on to something else. But because the game touts itself as a cinematic TTRPG, it's nice to let them have those moments and those spotlights, just because it allows them to get further into the character mindset and deepen their connection to the world, their characters, and the case itself.
Yeah. Does that help answer your question, Johnny? Or is there anything, like any clarification?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I have another question for later when we eventually go over like dangers and stuff. But
Cool.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah. Those will be coming up relatively soon, I think.
Yeah.
So I think that one kind of covered the exploring the depths, like the techniques for crafting clues and kind of enhancing the story and stuff.
Yeah.
When it comes to those, you just have to figure out like the location that you're going to be investigating. It should have those clues in there, but sometimes it can be a little stifling for you to create clues from nothing. You don't have to. I do the 5 rule just because I can always find another detail to do that. If you are in an area and you can only think of 2 clues, then let it just be those 2 clues. Let those be the clues that move them onto a different spot, or it could send them to a different depth. That's the whole point about being fluid and mobile with what these things actually represent in the game.
Yes. And I'll say the more depths you have, the larger and longer the case will go. Like a 4-depth case could go for like 10 sessions, depending on your group.
Yeah, easily.
Yeah. I've learned if I want to do a one-shot, it's 2 depths, and then each depth has 1 location. I've tested this out, and I found that players really love to like role play, and so they'll be in one location for like an hour, and I was like, oh god, this is going on for a while, and they need to go to the next one. So yeah, if I'm gonna do a one shot, it's gonna be very flat case.
Now, and it also depends on how long you play for too. Like I know some groups that play, they only have an hour to play. I don't see how the hell they do it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like I like 3 to 4 hours per session, just because it allows for a lot of fun to happen. But the ones that play like the 1 hour games, they're moving through stuff quickly and speedily, but they know the characters they're playing, they know the rules of the game, they know what they want to do, so they kind of just they'll sail through it without issue. Most games and most game tables that I've seen don't want to run that fast. So
1 hour.
yeah,
Yeah, you
1
have to
hour
know the
per
rules
session.
really well. Your character really well. Oh, dang. Okay.
Yeah.
That's wild.
And then the guy who helped, or the MC for City of Mist, Kevin Carpenter, he's got his show Rolling in the Mist. All of his episodes are like an hour and 10 minutes at most because it's a podcast.
Oof.
But he does a good job at getting everything moving along pretty quickly. It doesn't allow for a whole bunch of extra role play, but it does allow you to kind of get through cases, and it has like a more action-packed and oriented type of feel. If you want more exploration and character depth and building, it's probably better to have longer sessions, just because an hour is not enough, especially if you have let's say you have a 4-member crew. If they get 15 minutes once a week, that's not enough for them to really dive into the character unless they're doing lots and lots of talking about it in the week building up to the next episode.
Yeah, I guess it would have to be like between sessions. That's where you do the character building. About 1 hour. Oh.
And that would be just providing hypothetical situations between each character. Like, hey, how would you feel if I brought you XYZ? Or what's your favorite flavor of ice cream? That kind of stuff happens, but if it happens in chat and doesn't happen in the game, it doesn't feel as, I don't want to say potent.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But running a game, once you start emceeing and you start running a game, you'll see kind of the importance of being able to move them along. I'm not saying force them to stop, but you do have those moments where you're like, okay, this is great, but we got to get you guys moving into the next thing because we're just kind of lingering in this one area. And it takes practice to figure out where people's natural pauses are and where their stops are and where a person is stopping to think about what they would do rather than taking that pause and running with it. Like, okay, well, you ran out of stuff to say, so now we can move on. That doesn't always translate. But it does take a little bit of nuance and a little bit of growth as an MC to figure out when those best moments to move forward are.
Yeah, and there's those moments where characters are kind of joking around or something like that, and you can kind of tell, like, okay, I think their conversation can be cut off a little early as they're just kind of like breaking each other's balls or something like that. Like, okay, I think we can move forward.
I feel like those moments are things that shouldn't be rushed or cut off early either, because sometimes it's for characters specifically. Like if you have a moment where it was a deeply traumatic issue, like I know some people take umbrage with the deeply traumatic thing you went through should just constantly be deeply traumatic, but people don't function that way. People will potentially make a joke afterwards to try and break the ice
for sure.
themselves out of that funk.
Yeah.
And if you don't provide them that access or you cut that off from them, they're gonna feel like they were cheated out of a moment that they could have used for character building. So you have to be careful with that.
Have some type of release after those heavy moments. For sure.
And then once that happens and they kind of bubble down, and then if they just keep going, then you can cut it off if you want, unless that's like the way the characters work. Like if they're gonna bicker with each other, let them bicker for a little bit, but don't let it linger so much that it would be annoying to see on a television show.
Yes, I do think of these. I call them series episodes. It's very, very cinematic and television like. So I don't even call them sessions or campaigns.
I don't think we've ever come to like a conclusion onto what actually to call each episode we do.
Yeah. Well, does anybody else have any questions about like depths? What goes in each depth? Anything like that? If not, I think we'll go to danger creation.
Yeah, my favorite.
Oh yeah.
With D&D, you always had it was always a daunting task because everything had to have a stat block, which had the intelligence, the charisma, the wisdom, the strength, the dexterity, the constitution. It had all these numbers that just helped it hit you better or avoid being hit. That was the core crux of what that stat block was utilized, and then how it would attack you and yada yada yada. That was fine, and if you could just grab one from a book and plug and play, great. You always ran the risk of potentially killing your party because you didn't realize this monster was stronger, or there was really terrible rolls going on. That was all a whole mess to figure out and navigate, but that only came with experience. With this game, though, you can take the pre-existing ones. Like you go to the MC toolkit, and they have the dangers and everything in one section. I believe it was page. 118 is where it starts with the dangers, and then it just kind of goes on from there.
Yeah, I have the MC toolkit open. 118, yeah.
Yeah, and like I can provide dangers on the fly. Like mundane situations are really easy to do dangers for. The more involved ones, you would want to have them written down, just because it allows you to provide them with more character, more depth, more and more like connection to the case and then to the characters themselves. It gives you a little bit more, I don't want to say leeway, it gives you a little bit more of a way to connect with that danger and make them. So if you have somebody who's like a lawyer, you can make them a monologue type villain that can lay into the crew and just start destroying them with words or with something else that's going on, depending on the mythos. But whenever it comes to creating dangers, very easily, you can just use the ones from the MC toolkit. There's tons of great ones, from mundane dangers to the more myth empowered ones. You can take a danger and you can just give them like one of the power sets that's in there, which is really great. It's just a plug and play style. So
I love those.
Let's say like I have a barista and then I want her to have like the butterfly or the social butterfly stat block or power block. That gives her a ton of things, and it makes her immune to criticism from people who are pissy because their coffee order was wrong or their name was spelled incorrectly on the cup. You can add that in there just on the fly, but it is nice to know the MC toolkit and what it provides so you can navigate to it quickly. That way you're not taking too much time up in a game trying to look for something.
Mm-hmm. I use a lot of the dangers from the book. I think most of them are very, very creative, and they're very interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Rather than like regular like monsters or creatures and like where are they in the DMG, or I forgot which book they're in.
You're talking about the Monsters Manual.
Yeah, the Monsters Manual. But the way that everything's kind of written out here, or anything that Sonofoak puts out, I guess I'm biased, but I just think a lot of their work is so creative. And so I'll look there first to see if there's anything here that I can add in, and a lot of the time there is. But then sometimes you just need something super specific, a certain power set to kind of go against the players, the kind of antithesis of someone. So if someone's playing Batman, you want to create that Joker type character to, rub them the wrong way creatively. But there's a lot of good stuff. Creatively.
That's your safe word there. It's creatively rub them the wrong way.
There's other ways. Trust me. But danger creation is so much fun.
Yeah. And when it comes to the case, I've run into two schools of thought. One is, if you have a case, like your main bad guy, let's say, is a Scottish myth empowered person, great.
Yeah.
You can stick to the idea of the Scottish myth. So everything that the crew would involve would be nothing but mythos or myth empowered people that are from the Scottish area. You can utilize those and kind of create an entire theme around it, which is great, especially if you want to do something that's like gang based. A gang is going to have everybody that has similar ideals, similar goals, similar patterns and thoughts. So for them to all have the same kind of mythos, or mythos from the same area, works wonderfully. On the flip side, you could have just a melting pot of different mythoses. So you can have one from ancient Egypt, you can have one from Scotland, Ireland, Finland, Japanese, Chinese, Korean. The depth and spectrum of the myths you can pull from are nearly infinite, and you'll never run out of them. All you got to do is go to Wikipedia and type in, or even Google, type in like Egyptian myth, and then start looking at all the creatures they have there, and then figure out how you want to make them into a danger for the crew to face.
Yeah.
Now,
or
the one that I like.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, sometimes I Google just like myths about this, because this is like, my case is about this. Are there any myths about people like water based and like filling people's lungs with something, something like that, and then it'll pull up something and I go, oh, okay, I didn't know about that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the best parts about having Google, is you can be like, hey, myths about despair, myths about love deities, or something along those lines.
Exactly.
Whatever you feel like the crux of your case, or whatever the main component of your case is, you can look up those myths and build the danger off of that. Now, like one of my favorites that I finally got to use with a case that I just ran with my crew, with Maia and the rest of them, was a guy who was empowered by Dwarf of Svartalheim, the people who created Odin's rings, his weaponry, things like that. And he was a reluctant user of this, but what he did is he took mannequins, because he was a tailor. He took the mannequins that he would use to fit the clothing on there, and then he would carve the runes inside of them and use those runes to empower them and use them as protective elements, or people that needed to hunt them down. And then because he was being blackmailed, he would send those in his stead to go cause harm to people, whatever he marked them specifically with the dresses that they wore. So I did that one very specifically, but it had nothing to do with the main villain or the main MacGuffin of the case. It was all just a mishmash of different things because it allowed me that flexibility to play around different types of myth. So I've got a rune creating dwarf of Svartalheim who could cause mannequins to come to life and attack you, and then if you beat them, they would explode as one final last like gotcha moment, just to give a little bit of extra.
So petty.
Yeah. Well, it was to give you a little bit of extra danger too. It's like, hey,
Yeah.
you beat them down, but just because you beat them doesn't mean that they're not a threat still. They have one last little thing that could hit you.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like if you hit a suspect that was holding a gun, they're still moving and they're still conscious. That's great. You didn't hurt them. You didn't permanently maim them. They're still a threat because they still have the gun. So a lucky shot's a lucky shot. It can still hurt you.
Would you say it's easier to keep everything within theme though, in terms of writing a case?
No.
You don't think
not
so?
for me.
Okay.
No, because the thing is, when you write these cases, the mythos should kind of become secondary to what you're doing, right? The way that this game works, the way the city works is everybody in the city is a normal person, and then the people who are special have the myth that attaches to them. When they become avatars, that's a different story. They start running the show as the mythos. But for the most part, you're making people interacting with other people, and those people just happen to have superpowers and potentially goals that align with the mythos that's empowering them. But so with that in mind, you could have the barista, you could have the gang member, you could have the hedge fund manager. All of those are viable people to be a danger to you. It just depends on how they get involved with the case. And, revenge is always a good motivator, or the stolen relics being a good motivator. Money is always a good motivator. There's so many little things you can do. It just depends on how you want to build the case and what shows up. I always like revenge. Revenge has a personal element to it. It makes everything seem much more realistic to me. And it also gives the crew pause because the person is lashing out because they got hurt or because somebody that they love got hurt. That is an understandable motivation to utilize against any kind of threat that's going on. And it does make crews pause. They're like, oh, I feel bad for doing this now,
Or avenging someone.
Yeah, or avenging.
Yeah.
And it's like you have a book that can bring somebody back from the dead, but the price is a bunch of other people die. Somebody wanting to get their hands on a book that can resurrect somebody they love is a very understandable type of motivation. But the crew trying to stop that person just thinks you're trying to prevent me from getting the person that I love back. So are they villainous? Yeah, because what they're doing is still going to cause harm to a lot more people. But it's an understandable motivation as well. So it does provide that line and that little bit of nuance back and forth on, we're stopping you from hurting people, but we understand your plight and we understand the issue that you're running into or what you're trying to do. So they could either want to help you or they could want to put a permanent stop to you as well.
I also like just villains who are just evil. Like, just creating like a Lord Voldemort or like an Ozai from Avatar. They're just bad people who there's nothing deeper than that. And I guess that might sound boring, but like a Joker type character. We don't have to dig into his psychology. He's just chaotic. They're just like chaotic evil, and that's their thing. And that could be fun too.
Well, there's a reason that the Joker was voted the #1 villain in comics for a long time running. It's because of the antithesis and the fact that he provides so much fear and terror and especially in Gotham. Like against other heroes, he wouldn't really be much of an issue, depending on how they want to write him. But that's a whole different subject and conversation to have.
Yeah, for sure.
So when it comes to creating dangers, let's just, all right, so whenever you're creating the power sets, it's good to stay on type. So let's say you created a danger that is the one that I created very specifically was Tiffany Malt was one of her. So she was the one that utilized the power of the Nixie, which is a shape-shifting water spirit. Her danger profile, she is not a hardy type of person. So if she takes 2 points of damage, or I think 3, she gets taken out. She's defeated. So you have to look at the dangers that you're creating and understand how strong they are and what their weaknesses or their fragilities are. The higher the level of danger, the more powerful that they would be, the more punishment they can take. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. And that's like a series end bad guy, a person that the crew has been fighting multiple sessions across to get to that one person, and they've leveled up. And you think of it like an end of arc type of thing. So if you start off at level 1 and hit to level 5, it's a level 5 type of character that they got to fight. But
Also,
every other danger should fall within within the crew's realm of being able to handle or dish out the pain.
Also, a good thing to remember is that dangers aren't just the BBUG. It's specifically anything that kind of stands in the player's way. So I was having fun and I created a danger who was the rift of Karen, like the late, like just it could be anybody. And it's just
Karen.
yeah, she was the rift of a Karen, and I just had fun doing that. It's just like someone who's just like annoyingly in their way, who they just have to get past, and it doesn't have to be the BBG. It could just be like a Karen, just someone who's like super gossipy and getting in all in your business, and then you need to cross the street, but she keeps asking questions or judging you, or is like about to call the cops because something stupid. But like it could be anything like that. Yeah, those are fun too. Those simpler ones.
Yeah, and to your point too, like a danger doesn't have to be somebody that you're fighting all the time.
Yeah.
So the MC toolkit does provide a list of mundane dangers. So you have police officers, you have activists, you have speeding cars, you have burning buildings. Those are also dangers. So
security alarms.
As long as you as long as you set them up, it's just a situation that you're going to run into that could potentially make the story more tense or provide you with a failure or potential for you to get hurt. Dangers provide those things, and I'm not saying just get hurt, because you also have being emotionally defeated or having your reputation ruined or smeared or something along those lines. There's multiple little conditions you can take throughout it. It just depends on the narrative.
Right.
Itself.
And there's also one that I used, the family dinner. That was a danger, and it had a lot of stressful situations that you had to. There's like things that would max out certain spectrums. That one was fun. So yeah.
They have a question in the chat. It says, the Real MacGuffin, do you use any rules of thumb to determine how difficult to make a danger or dangers for a particular crew? Like in D&D, is it as broken as there is the CR system? So the CR system in D&D is a little bit rough, just because it's like if you have 3 level 7 characters, they should be able to handle a CR 7 monster, generally in like a half-half kind of format. With City of Mist, when it comes to figuring out how dangerous a danger should be for the crew, if it's a person or if it's a mythos empowered type of person, you have to look at what the crew can dish out. So if your crew is mostly investigative and they don't have a lot of offensive power, make it to where they have like a tier 3 hurt or subdue spectrum, because the crew might not be combat oriented and they might not be able to dish out a bunch of pain. So making it to where the person can be talked down is one way, and you also can provide different win conditions. So you've got hurt or subdue, you can talk them down, you can convince them, you can manipulate them, you can disenchant them or bribe them. It all depends on what you want to do, but keep in mind the danger as a character or as a personality whenever you're creating those conditions. So I have a college girl or a college-aged girl who is empowered by a water spirit that can allow her to shapeshift into people. She's not going to be able to take a lot of damage because she's never done combat sports or any kind of combat training or never taken a punch in her life, really. Mm-hmm. So her being a super badass, being able to take a lot of damage doesn't make a whole lot of sense unless her mythos would provide it. Because it's a shapeshifter and it's like a water spirit, her being able to turn into water to allow her to soak a little bit of damage might be one way to go about it. But as a whole, she shouldn't be able to take a whole lot, especially because the crew's not going to be very damage dealing oriented. So you just got to keep that in mind as well. And then on the flip side, if you're creating a danger and you notice that the crew is going to steamroll them, or they get really lucky and they get like a really strong hit, right? They can do a tier 5 status, which would max her out. You can let her get beat unless you want them to, I don't want to say earn it, because they already earned it with the lucky roll or the good roll or whatever power tags they use. But if you want the crew, or you want the challenge to last a little bit longer, just implement a status filter. So if you throw a status filter on them, it takes whatever the number is and reduces the incoming damage by that amount. So
for example,
the stronger you give that status, or the higher number you give that status filter, it will make them harder to defeat. So if for like Tiffany, whenever she got empowered by the book, she gained the status filter that was a 3. So if you deal a tier 5 status to her, she reduces that by 3, so it drops her down to a tier 2 status. She's still only one away from being defeated. Yeah, but she's still only 1 point or 1 status tier away from being defeated. But that does allow you to keep the danger going on for longer and provide more tense moments. So you have to keep in mind your crew and what they can dish out. If you've seen their power tags, you know, okay, they can fight here, they can fight there, they can do this, they can do that. I gave conditions to talk her down or to convince her, and the higher the number, the more impossible, or not more impossible, but the more difficult it is to reach it because of the progressive nature of that system. So if you can if you can try and do a convince move with 3 power tags consistently, great. It's going to take you a while to build up to tier 5 though, because you've got to deal a tier 3 status. You deal another tier 3 status that goes to tier 4 because of the 2 numbers adding together make 4. You'd have to deal another one, and that only gets you 3 points to tier 5. So in total, you would have to have 4 successful convince rolls of tier 3 to get to tier 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so if you can play with it a little bit, and if you learn how your characters maneuver, how they do things, it's good to keep in mind what they're capable of when building a danger, so you know the most likely route they're going to take, so you can either buff up against it, or you can make that character very specifically weak to that to give one character like a really shining moment, you know? Like for like Nicole, if I wanted to make a danger specifically for her, I would create somebody who could twist her words around, or would have a status filter very specifically against any kind of traps that she would utilize when it comes to getting him into these like arguments. And then I would also give him an ability that would allow him to burn her credibility or stop her from being able to utilize certain tags whenever she fails a roll, you know?
Yeah. And Nicole is my character, and she is a law student, and she's really good with words, and she's the Rift of Machiavelli. She's really tactical about how she speaks. So that would be, that's being very specific about what your players can do. But yeah, I agree. The status filters make things stronger, like Marcus is saying in the chat. Also, if there's certain dangers that can conjure certain things, or there's always something like they can bring in another danger to take the status for them.
Oh yeah, like
which
you
is
have
helpful.
Like a gang leader or like a necromancer. Necromancer is great because it can summon zombies or spirits or other small deities and imps and things like that. They can always just show up and take the danger for them. And as long as you write that as a custom ability, it's, some people might think it's cheap. I don't, because if you can pull it out on the fly, good for you. But if you write it down, it just makes you feel a little bit better as an MC. Like, okay, I didn't do this specifically to screw you over. It was already part of the character.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions about danger creation or adding them to the story, anything like that?
Yeah, actually, somewhat related to adding them to the story, so to speak. Is I was running a pre-made case, and I ran into this situation where basically it was the big like final boss encounter, and some circumstances happened that an even bigger bad showed up, shall we say,
Okay.
and the bad that they were fighting before was now like also on their side against this new like bigger bad.
Okay.
And I had absolutely zero idea like what to do with the original big bad in the combat. Like I didn't give them any sort of I didn't give them a spotlight for it. I think I just had them like act once, basically using like one of their hard moves to inflict like tier 2 status or whatever it was. But
got it. So now you're running that big bad as a PC, kinda?
I was in the moment,
Okay.
It was, but yeah, it was just for that specific case, because it was kind of a multi-shot kind of deal to get some friends into the system. But yeah, how would you guys recommend running like a danger as an ally in the moment, or maybe as an ally going forward?
I've actually done this a couple of times, so I have the perfect advice for you on this.
Nice.
So, like you said, you had the big bad that they were fighting, and then the bigger bad showed up, and then the original big bad is now on their side. Great. That is a wonderful device to use inside of a session or inside of a case. It's a great thing to see. Okay, hey, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, so we have to work together. When it comes time to use your original big bad, give them a spotlight just like your characters have, or your player characters do. So they'll act, and then you act as the MC between them, and then it'll go to somebody else. But when you do that, so you said you were using one of their hard moves as a consequence that you can throw at the new bigger bad. Instead of doing that, you take a hard move. Let's say one of their hard moves is shot 3 because they have a pistol they're using. Use that 3 as their power tags. So they're going to have 3 power tags and it'll give them a power of 3. Roll for them with a +3. That way it gives them the chance to fail in the scene, and it doesn't override them by them being able to automatically do damage like they would, because the dangers don't have the option to dodge or do any of that kind of thing like the players do. They don't have a face danger roll on their own. So if you can automatically hit them, that's kind of cheap for one danger to do to another danger. So if you want to run a danger like a PC, kind of play them like a PC and just use their the tier of the status that they would deal as the power. So if they could do a tier 4, they roll with 4 power. They still have the potential to fail that roll, and that gives it a little bit more levity. And then you can treat them as being able to take like whatever their hurt or subdue spectrum is. You can make it like a PC, or you can leave it as it was. So if they had a tier 3 status that they could take, and then the bigger bad hits them with the tier 3, take them out. It gives your bigger bad some kind of like gravitas, and also it allows them to see, hey, he can hurt us. Like he took out the big bad we were gonna fight in one shot. That is a scary moment for any PC to deal with.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
And then
that's
also
really helpful.
Yeah, then also as Marcus was saying, if you wanted to, you can give the big bad, turn him into like an ally card that one of the other players can utilize as well. You'd have to be able, now, in my opinion, that's a good way to do it.
Yeah.
So that's if you're going to do the next session, you kind of have to create the ally card rapidly for them. So if you don't have that prepped, it can be a little bit hard to do on the fly. But if you can do it real quick, then go for it.
Yeah, I was going to say at the very least you can have it prepped for next session, but I don't know if I would be able to create that ally card so quickly in the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, that sounds good. Using their, maybe even, have you thought about this? Even like their soft moves technically don't have a status on them, but maybe that's their tag.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to. So all a soft move is for a danger is setting up something. It's a warning to the players that something bad is going to happen. So like a really basic one is, hey, the big bad you're fighting is raising their hands up and you see green energy starting to leak from their palms and their fingertips. I don't know what that's going to do as a player. I just know something bad's going to happen if I don't try to stop it. That's the only thing. And if the players do nothing to stop it, or they fail on their roll to stop it, that's when you can hit them with the consequence of it. Yeah.
Yeah, same. I can't write those cards on the fly like that.
Yeah. See, I could eventually, like, if you have the ally tag, if that's what you wanted to do, depending on when it happens. So like if you're in a session and it's like, oh, let's say you're an hour and a half into your 3-hour session. The bigger bad showed up and the big bad is now being replaced. Call for a break right then and there, write the down on the card quickly, and hand it to them before you guys start the session up again. There's no shame in doing a break to give you just a couple minutes to prepare, to give them something cool to utilize in the scene going forward. Mm-hmm. Because like we're all friends, we're all people that get together. It's like, hey guys, I know the bigger bad is now here and you guys want to utilize, or the big bad's gonna help you out. Give me like 5 minutes to write this out. So we're going to pause here real quick. Everybody go to the bathroom, get something to drink, do whatever. I'm going to fill this out and we can resume here in a minute.
Oh, I've used breaks for multiple things.
Yeah. Breaks are underrated.
Yes. Love a break. Does anybody have any other danger questions? If not...
I have one.
Yeah.
I was just gonna ask, how would you determine what tier of status this danger deals? What would be a good metric for that?
Oh, okay. So Kevin Carpenter had a good kind of rule of thumb for what they can deal. Mm-hmm. So what a danger can dish out, they should also be able to take. So if you give a danger the ability to deal a tier 3 status, they should also be able to take a tier 3 status without being defeated right away. So like I would take whatever they can dish out and then make their hurt or subdue spectrum +1 or whatever it's going to be. So if they are a verbal sparring type of danger, then make the convince or the shame spectrum their whatever tier status they would deal +1. So if you can deal 3, his shame spectrum is 4. If you can deal 4, his shame spectrum is 5. Yada yada. So it's just a way to make them a viable threat to the players. And sometimes they can be defeated in one shot. There's nothing wrong with that. It does feel a little anticlimactic for you, especially whenever you wrote out this really awesome danger, what you think is an awesome danger, and then your PCs get really lucky with a roll, or they have some power tags that all just manage to stack up perfectly for that, and then they take them out in one hit.
Oh, we have several examples.
Yeah, and I got no problem with that. That's why the status filter exists, though, is because if you know your PCs can play like that or what they can do, status filters reduce the incoming damage to give your dangers a chance to actually be dangerous and impacting the scene. So,
yeah. I will say, Drake, we have about 13 more minutes.
Okay, yeah.
So
tying in player characters.
Yeah, the next topic was how to tie in the PCs, integrating like their backgrounds, motivations, mysteries into the case.
Yeah. Specifically with tying in characters, I know a lot of people will get hung up on the mysteries or the questions that get asked on the mystery cards. Those are not mysteries that can be solved in one session, and they should not be hard-line questions that have a definitive answer. Like, what is black and white? One is black, one is white. Those are colors. That's a really simple question to ask. So
yeah,
if you've got a player character who says, "What is the nature of evil?" That's a really broad, esoteric, philosophical type of question that can be solved, or not even really be solved, but just explored. So rather than trying to do it all in one, though, you should pepper in little clues for their mythos in each session you do, or try to at least. You can't do it for every session because some are going to have action-packed moments that don't allow for it. Some are going to have moments where other characters take the spotlight for a little bit longer. So just, again, be fluid with it. But what is the nature of evil? Let's say you have like a vigilante who punishes crime, and they're chasing after somebody who managed to steal something from the store, and they're about to beat them down, and then all of a sudden they find out that all they were stealing was food because they're homeless and their children were starving. Is that person evil because they committed a crime, or are they good because they're trying to provide for somebody in a moment of desperation? You've got all these little nuanced things you can ask in that moment, and it'll give that character pause when it comes to delivering their brand of justice, if that's what they do. It's like, will they let him go? Do they consider that evil? Does it shatter their black and white thinking, or their all is one and all is the other, and it's got to be 100% this and there is no deviation? Or will that put a crack in their armor and allow them to start being softer on certain things and change their morality a little bit?
Yeah, and that's why they have that question at the end of a session. Do you feel like any of your themes are under strain? It's just asking, do you feel like you're going against any of your identities or the mystery? So if it's presented by the MC and your identity is there is no middle ground, it's either black or white, and then they present a situation where you actually there's like some moral gray, and you go against it, that's kind of like going against that theme card. And so that's why I'd ask that question. So
and
yeah,
the thing about being the MC is you've got to read those, and then what I like to do is, if I was going to run like a longer campaign for characters, what I would do is I would take each character's theme cards once they've written them down, because I'm going to have access to all their profiles that they're making on there, obviously. But I would take one character, and then I would say, okay, in this session, I need to introduce one of these elements. I would look at my case, and then I would introduce an element that could challenge an identity or provide a question for a mystery. That's all you got to do. One mystery or one clue every couple sessions for each character will be enough to keep them engaged and invested and wanting to explore their mythos, rather than just thinking they're a character who has superpowers. It allows them that opportunity to look beyond that a little bit more. And then the same thing with the identity, because the identity is the logos. It's a hard line axiom of their character and what they do. So you got a bounty hunter who says, I'll hunt them no matter what. and they're hunting somebody, and then they get
then they stop.
sidetracked because somebody needs saved.
Yeah.
That is immediately I don't want to say it's a crack, because you have to give them a chance. Like, do you want to continue the hunt and leave the person you could save alone, or do you want to save that person and abandon your hunt? If they abandon it, they're going against the hardline axiom of their character. Then you can mark like a fade or a crack on that particular card.
Yeah, and like Marcus is saying, don't try to fill in opportunities for all of them each session. It really, and it's like a fine balance. There's like multiple aspects that come into play as to why it can't work at this moment. So yeah, I think you can try to find one maybe for each session if you're really all about the characters. If you're creating a campaign specifically around all of their actions, it only matters what they do and then the world responds to it. I think you can kind of get away with it, answering, focusing on someone's mystery or statement per session.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's like the case is a little bit different, so it won't work right here, but maybe next session. So yeah.
And that's the thing too, is like, if you've got a crew of 4 people, you cannot put 4 mystery clues in each case every session. So
Yeah.
pick one person and
Yeah.
try to find one clue and find like a fluid area to drop it in.
Yeah. How
That
can
one
I?
person is taken care of, and then the next session you do it for somebody else. Don't force it. It doesn't always work. You just got to be cognizant of the opportunities of where you could sometimes drop one in there.
Yeah. I'll say, so pick one of their identities, those identity statements or the mystery question, and then just say, how can I challenge it this session? And will it work? Can I weave it in seamlessly? If you can't, that's just the way of cases or that session. But it can happen eventually.
And then, yeah, and then like whenever you want to weave in like a character's or make it more memorable and impactful for them,
Yeah.
you've got to take something that the character holds dear,
Yes.
or an idea that they love, or something along those lines. Either put it in danger, or challenge it, or make it something where the character feels like they had an impact on it. They have to have some kind of impact in the story. You want to make them feel like they did something that did it. So me personally, I like to set up challenges for my characters that are specifically geared towards allowing them to shine. So like Nicole in the law student world, I would want to ideally put her in a mock trial, because that is where she would shine the most. Or the detective would shine at like in a precinct or at a crime scene. Or we have the rumors wielding person would be very great inside of like a house party, trying to find all this and sowing discord and chaos among them. They all have their niche where they excel.
Yeah.
Most of them should be able to function in each part of the case pretty averagely. They should average 2 to 3 power tags for every kind of situation they would go into. Ideally, not always, but there are going to be those situations where they could throw 9 power tags down in one and just one-shot everything, and that should be like their shining moment of glory that you get to pull out for them.
Oof. Yeah. I like it. Does anybody have any questions about tying in backstories or motivations or anything like that? Then we will move on. We have like 6 minutes. I wanted to share my setup on my notes, but I know that we had like one section which is like final confrontations, but
Yeah, that's fine. You can go over your notes, because final confrontations is just basically taking the danger aspect that we talked about earlier, making it a little bit more bombastic, a little bit larger, and then adding extra elements basically to the environment. So you take a danger that can deal with X amount of statuses or whatever it is, elevate them a little bit, make them harder to beat, give them a couple more custom moves or a status filter. Just because they're the big bad final guy, they should be able to take a lot of punishment, and it should take the crew working together to overcome them. Not one person should be able to take them out on their own, unless they do like a stop holding back, But for the final confrontation, you've got the bad guy, and then you've got the environment around them. Make the environment as much of a danger as the bad guy, because it can still harm them, or it can provide them a win condition to where they're not just punching the bad guy until he stops moving. Final confrontations are just culmination of everything you've been building up towards. So you can utilize all those elements together to make something a little bit more impactful for them. And then what you got for your stream? Okay. Oh yeah. Your notes. Take it away.
Yeah. So this is just how. Oh, it's not going to show. If anybody wants to see, this is kind of like the the technical version of everything of how I have my notes, and I have my miscellaneous notes for my next case, but I won't show because there's a couple of people here. Oh.
Oh, it's fine. I'll leave stream.
No. This is for my other group. Well, one of Drake's in, so I won't show. But this is how I have it set up. I have a little session counter, so I check this off each session for how many that we've done. There's a little button that generates a session planning page for me. So every time I have a new session that I'm planning for, or I just click on that, and then a new page is created. And what I start off with is I've really kind of how would I say I've worked on this a lot. It was a lot more detailed than I found out as the more that I MC. I was like, okay, I don't need all this stuff. What's actually the most important? What am I actually using each session? So like we were just talking about, and tying in the PCs and things like that. So I start off with reviewing the crew members, their current themes, mysteries, identities, any new developments. Will it work this session? And then I have a little arrow that ties to their page, and I can open it up like in a side tab, and I look at their mystery. She has 2 mysteries and the 2 identities. Can I challenge this session? If not, that's okay. It might not work this session. And then I have like my miscellaneous notes. If I'm doing like a tech check, it's literally anything that doesn't have to do with the actual story. It could just be with like, hey, remind them that there was a lot of interruptions. So just to be mindful of that next time, any miscellaneous notes like that. And then I'll add in number 1. We'll start off with the recap. In Notion, you can press @ and then you can look for certain pages in your Notion document or whatever. And so I'll press @ and then I'll go look at the past session notes, and then I'll just put that in the recap part. So let's say it was this here, and then I'll open that up, read through that as the recap for the next session. And then I'll have an opening scene as that transition. So I'll say, hey, this is what happened last time. And then I put a little note, little line of dialogue for myself. And now you find yourselves ... In the sessions before, I'll ask, where will you go next and what will you do next? And then I'll put that down here. And then for my next session notes, I'll put it right here for their goals and plans for this session. And then just remind the players like, hey, last week you said you wanted to do this. Do you want to address that now? You know, their plans for this session. I do have a sequence of events, and I'll tell you most of the time they don't go in that sequence, but it's there just to have some type of outline. Probably don't, might not need this because I go where the players say they want to go. So if they wanted to go to visit the mall because there's clues there, they need to go to the beach or Fortune Row, I'll put that in the sequence of events. But that doesn't mean they'll always go 1 to 1 to 1, 1 then to 2 then to 3. It could go 3 and then to 1 and then to 2 and then to 5. But it's just good to have it there and to recall. Trying to think, if I go to my old, I have the exposition session notes, which is that session 0. All my old session prep notes, I just drag it here so I can take it and then I put it in there. And so they're all there like this. And then I have a page for just the characters. And Johnny, your group has something similar like this, where I can read all about the characters. I also shared this. If anybody wants the link again, I have a template if anybody likes this. And this is all their information. Then I'll add more notes if they tell me something that they want to achieve or anything like that.
And for everybody here, if you guys want, I can throw you the document that I did whenever I ran our session, called Broken and Splintered. That's the name of the case and everything. It's just a PDF, but it's got it's 21 pages, but it's all because it's all in sequence. It's not formatted like a PDF or with any with columns and stuff. It's just all straight through. So. Oh, okay.
That's a lot of pages.
I mean, I'll send it to you. You've seen it.
Yeah. And then I have different pages for the danger profiles, and then I have my danger profile template, which I got. I just copied this from someone made something on the City of Mist garage, and it's basically this. Just made it a little bit simpler. And yeah, this is how I build up my dangers right here. And I got some cool ones here. Also, I'll say Lisa Moreau. She's the only one that I didn't plan for our game. This was just me following along with the players. She was just going to be someone's mother, and then she wasn't. And then suddenly she was more important. And now it's just me going with the flow of the game. I have the theme kits, relics on this page. I have an archive page because, sometimes I don't want to throw something away. It might come back. So I have a lot of stuff that's just right here. If a player leaves, if they want to come back, I put them in archive. I have dangers right here, open and monologues, anything that I don't want to throw away, but, businesses and locations. I made a Discord ripoff. It's called Ripcord. Yes, so that's gonna be in all my games. All my worlds are gonna have Ripcord and Goober. Okay, yeah. So if you ever play with me, Goober and Ripcord, they're in there. Okay.
If you ever play with her, Goober is evil. Do not trust it.
Oh, wow. You know what Goober is? It's the ripoff of Uber, but the gimmick is that all the drivers are also part-time psychologists. Their quote is ride with insight, where every journey supports your journey. I wish there was a commercial. I love that so much. And then I just have this is just for me personally, but in terms of emceeing, this is all the main stuff that I use here. Let's see if I have old session prep notes. Let's see, what did I actually write down? Yeah, so spotlighting characters, Cassia, identity crisis, what information is true about me, and then Deckard had no one can find out. And so this is about, I think he killed one of his partners, and this is about that. He doesn't want anybody to...
only partner.
Yeah. What'd you say?
He killed his only partner. So his
only partner, yeah.
Yeah, he and his best friend, whenever they were growing up, became cops, and then the best friend was corrupt. So he ended up having to take him out. He wanted to arrest him, but his friend drew a gun on him, and then it became a shootout. Deckard ended up killing him, and then that's what unlocked his Mark of Cain, because he killed his brother in arms. So poetic for the way that the original story goes, and then adding a little bit for an updated take on it. So brother in arms, still technically his brother, didn't want to kill him but had to.
Yeah, had to be done, as they say. But yeah, so this was last year, and as you can see, a lot of this stuff changed. I shortened a lot of stuff, but I was trying to think of ways how can I incorporate it, so I had it in my session notes to look through while we play. This is all like my dialogue that I was gonna say. I'm trying to think. This was last year, so I haven't looked at this. But I do also love using stars and wishes as well. It's a good feedback form, a good way of getting players' thoughts. What did they like about the session? A wish. What do you want to see moving forward? And that helps me as well.
You gotta let them know that there's not gonna be, there's no retaliation. It's like, hey, look, if there's something you didn't like, you gotta let me know now, because I won't be able to grow with you or to provide you with a better experience unless I know what you're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. I know some people, maybe they don't like confrontation, or they just want to be really polite. But I always say, hey, I'm open to everything. I'm not going to take it bad. But if I don't know, then we kind of stick with the same thing. So, hey, let me know what you're thinking, and then we can change or pivot or add stuff in. Let me know what you're thinking. So always have that space for people. And so this was this year. So my miscellaneous notes, Goober driver personas. Listen, we never got to them, but I put them in the notes. Drake, you haven't met them yet, but there was Dolores, there was Brad. He was a surfer dude from San Diego. I was like so ready to.
No.
It's like, so what's your issue, bro? And then there was Brandy, who was like, who was a Valley girl.
I knew it.
She just got her degree. She sounds so annoying.
You can stop that right now.
Okay. Anyway, so they have the recap. Once again, these are the old session notes, so I'll just open it like in a side peek. And I'll just read through this as we do the recap real quick. And And then I had like quotes for the paparazzi because someone was about to go into a courtroom scene. So I wrote down, I like improv and stuff like that, but it does help me feel just a little bit more confident to have like certain dialogue points already written out so that I don't forget. Then I had, like I say, the opening scene. We transition into the courtroom, and then have the PC's goals, and then the sequence of events, stars and wishes, and then move on to Deckard's case, which is Drake right here, who's also been talking.
Yeah.
And so we just finished his case, and we'll move on to another MC, which I put here in my notes. Andrew is going to be 2B, season 2B. And then we just finished 2A, ran by Drake here. But yeah, this is how I usually kind of keep everything organized. Towards the bottom here, I have some different notes that I'm throwing at the wall to see what I want to do next when I'm running. But yeah, this is my notes, and if anybody wants this link again, I think I shared it in the MC page already.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is just me, how I stay organized, how I plan out for the full series, and then each session individually.
And I will say specifically for City of Mist, like there is always a fear that I get right here from MCs that they don't want to railroad players, or they're afraid players will think that they're trying to railroad them. As long as you hide them, the players will never know that they're being guided on rails. This type of game, the way with the investigation, if you play like I call it classic City of Mist, where you play it rules is written by the book, what it would devolve into when you're solving cases and stuff like that, that kind of necessitates rails, which is fine because it takes you from point A to point B to point C to the finale, whichever way you want to go there. You're giving them the information, and you're just giving them the information that would get them to the next point. That's a rail that they don't, but they're allowing themselves to follow, and they're making the choices. So don't be afraid to give them limited information that would get them from one place to another. They're still going to want to explore stuff. They're still going to do stuff on their own. They're still going to take off. But eventually that's fine, because you can have them in point A, they can spread out and do something else. They're still going to come back to point B eventually, but you just let them wander off a little bit. So don't be afraid of the rails. Just make sure you can hide them so that they're not feeling like they're being forced to go left and right rather than straightforward.
Yeah, I call them I like linear story. I call them linear stories, and that helps me as a GM. And
disparaging term.
Yeah, I think railroad is just like, you can't do this. Oh, you have an idea? Well, it doesn't work because I need you to go here. Like, okay, well, that sucks.
It feels really control freaky.
Yeah. I have a general, road that you're on, but if there's stuff on the side of the road that you want to see, like, I'm not going to stop you. And if you make certain decisions, it's going to affect the game, like the world, and we're going to go from there. So like we had one session where Drake, his character decided to like punch a cop's.
The very first session.
It was right. He decided to punch a cop's window, and I was like, "Are you sure?" And then he still did it, and there was consequences. He got shot in the leg. He started to run. They called other cops, and then there was a whole chase sequence. And then they put him in the back of a SWAT car, and he was supposed to go to the hospital. They did not take him to the hospital, and that's how that session ended.
Well, that's a good one too, because my shenanigans revealed that no cops in a city of 10 million people would ever be able to respond within 30 seconds to another cop getting attacked. They were a coordinated effort.
Oh yeah, they were there suspiciously quick, which was on purpose. But that's why I was like, "Are you sure?" Because
yeah, I was.
No, it was great. It made for a great gameplay. It was awesome.
I hear MCs go like, "Are you sure?" And then a lot of people will back off like, "No, it's fine." Like, "No, to hell with that. I'm doing this."
No, please do it. I ask, "Are you sure?" But I really secretly want you to do it. But yeah, that's just me. But yeah, that's the end of our behind the scenes construction zone. Hopefully, you learned something new, saw some different points of view. These are all just suggestions. Remember, you can run your game the way that works best for you. But yeah, does anybody have any final questions before we finish off? Any final questions, comments? Okay.
Cool.
Drake, any final comments?
No, not really. I mean, if it comes down to it, I mean, if you guys like, I'm in the City of Mist Discord, so
Yeah.
if you want to tag me, you can, and then I can ask questions or I can answer questions if they come up. I like doing these kind of behind the scenes things specifically for the players that we end up playing with because it allows them to see how much time and effort goes into being an MC. You do a lot of research. You have to know the rules. You have to know like the power levels, and you're trying to weave in things. And sometimes players get frustrated because they feel like they're not being included, or that their mythos isn't being explored, or their identities aren't being respected, or something along those lines. You have to show them this kind of stuff so that they can see, hey, it's not that I'm not trying here. It's just that you're not giving me any opportunities for that to happen, or the story isn't allowing for it yet. I'm still working on it. So it will come up. You just got to be patient with me, because I can't force those moments, because when you force them, that's when they feel cheap and the players feel like it doesn't matter. And I've tried multiple times in the past to try and force it in there, and it always ends up feeling a little bit cheap, and they kind of feel the same way. So when it happens organically, they love it. So just don't force it. Let it run its course.
Yeah, and I think it's okay to have that conversation at the session 0 or the exposition session to be like, hey, there's a lot going on behind the screen. So if you feel like some things about your character aren't being met just yet, I would say just hold off. I still remember everything. It's just going to take some time. I think that's okay to kind of like put that out there for players to know.
And also specifically, like, a session 0 is not just before you guys play. You can call a session 0 at any time, and it just gives everybody a chance to come back together and then like kind of get your expectations on the line, whether it's 10 sessions in, 20, 30, like in 3 years from now.
Oh yeah, the group that I'm in with Drake right now, we started in October or November of last year. After Andrew's done and I come back, I'm going to do like a check-in with everybody and send out like a form and see how everybody's feeling, and then that's going to help for my next case. We're also going to do like a series refresh and talk, verbally with each other, but I'm still going to send out a form, which I think is good as a campaign or a series check-in to see how everybody's feeling. And this is kind of like another session 0, so.
And then one last tip that I will throw out there.
Yeah.
If you are playing with a group of people who are new to this system, who have never played City of Mist, and they never ran like any of the pre-gen characters, and they made their own right off the bat, wonderful. After your first case, basically take those players, pull them aside, pick like another day to session 0 it out, basically, and say, hey, look, we played this case. You guys have a better idea of how the game works. You understand how power tags works. You understand these kinds of rules here and there. Take a look at your power tags and see if there are any that you want to swap out. Give them a chance to make their characters better or to fall more in line with their playstyle, because if they've never played before, they don't know what their playstyle is going to be, especially with the new system. So give them an opportunity to, I hate to say like min-max, but give them a chance to make their characters a little bit more in line with what they think they would be in the game.
Yeah, 100% agree. Yeah. Because you've played like 8 sessions now, you're like, oh, okay, this didn't really work the way that I wanted it to. Come in and just be like, yeah, you could rewrite the entire character. You could just do a new one. But I just want to say thanks for everybody who was listening in. I'll upload this to YouTube, and anybody who wants to re-listen to it and rewatch it, feel free. But yeah.
Probably a little bit of rambling here and there, but it's kind of the nature of TTRPGs. A lot of talking.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'll add some background music too.
Okay, so it won't just be so dead air. Okay, gotcha.
For the love of God, please add some music.
Yeah. Thanks everybody that did show up. It's good to have everybody here. Good questions from Johnny, and then in the chat as well. Yeah. And I don't know. We might think we might end up doing this again. Maybe with something like a specific goal, like, hey, we're going to spend an hour talking about dangers and creating them for them. Yeah,
that could be fun too. Just solely focus on dangers. Dangers are really fun. Yeah. Just come with like your craziest ideas. Literally.
Yeah. Like if you want, like if we put it out there, like I would be cool if like, hey, I want to make a danger that's based off of this. Just throw that shit at me, and then I'll start making them, and then we can go over them in the middle of the chat or whatever it's gonna be.
I think
Also,
also relics,
as a
okay? Because I
resource-
still need help making relics. I really love them.
Yeah, relics I love too, so let's go for that.
Bean kits.
And just so everybody's aware, the City of Mist does have a channel on YouTube. Kevin Carpenter has a bunch of great videos, like what, I can't remember what he calls it, like running the mist. or something along those
Are you
lines.
talking about when he shows the actual examples?
Yeah, he has like 7-minute videos, and he shows
Yes.
you how a move gets used, how the power tags are utilized. It has the graphics, it has all the stuff on there.
I think it's
Those
called
are
like
great,
action
and then-
action something.
Yeah. So those are all great, and then there are also like lore bits and then other aspects of the game that are discussed in those videos. They're not long; they're like 7 minutes apiece. They have their live
Perfect.
streams if you want to watch them. But
Yeah.
I would highly recommend those running the game videos first. There's only like 7 of them so far, and I don't know if they're going to do any more, but they're a good jumping off point for anybody who's new.
Oh,
And
yes.
even if you're
yes.
experienced, it's good to go look too. So
I watched those so much when I like in the very very beginning, because it was like now that you know the rules, here's how you implement it. Like this is how it actually works in game. It's kind of this is how it would work in game type examples, and it's amazing.
yeah, and he does a really good job. Like the graphics that they utilize
Yeah.
for like the player tokens and then the City of Mist maps, those are wonderful tools to be able to utilize, and then you can see it in real time. So I know some people are visual learners, other people aren't. I'm a little bit of a mixture of both. So
I'm fully visual. But yeah, so everybody have a good weekend, and again, thanks for coming out to listen.
yeah, appreciate it, guys.